You can go home again, so long as you understand that home is a place where you have never been. Ursula Le Guin, The Dispossessed. Damn it, said Jake, coming out of his study into the bedroom where Alex was packing her bags. What's the matter? She asked, looking up through her dark brown shoulder-length hair. It's this stupid film, said Jake, sitting down heavily on the bed in front of her and sighing. Jake had been working on a story for a new film, and his deadline was just a few days away. His handsome face was lined and he looked fed up. He was finding the writing hard and he was tired. Alex tried to care. But behind her husband, through the window, she could see New York shining in the late afternoon autumn sunlight. She was busy preparing for her trip to England. Her flight was leaving later that evening. She felt a longing to be gone, to be somewhere else. I'll never get it right, Jake went on. Of course you will, said Alex weakly. You know you always do. They both noticed the slight annoyance in her voice. There was a silence. So, when you come back, maybe we can take a vacation. Jake's voice sounded hopeful. I mean, he went on, just a couple of days, a long weekend perhaps. Maybe we can go to Palm Springs. Alex's eyes wandered to the tall silver buildings set against the pale blue sky. Maybe, she said, smiling and trying to make it sound like it was a real possibility but not managing it. Jake got up quickly and went back to his study, shaking his head. Alex tried to wipe the confused look on Jake's face from her mind and carried on packing. As usual, she was finding it difficult to decide which clothes to take. Though she was a buyer for an international fashion house and travelled a lot, she never found it easy to pack. And now it was even more difficult. She was going to the north of England to visit her parents. She was going home for the first time in over 10 years. She was going home to deal with the past. She was 32 years old. A mix of autumn and winter clothes, she decided in the end. You never knew what the weather would be like in England, and she loved knitwear, especially woolen sweaters. Not everyone could wear knitwear, but she could. She finished her packing, then felt tired and lay down on the bed. Her eyes looked up at the landscape painting on the wall opposite the bed. It was of the moors around the place where she had grown up, a copy of a famous painting. She loved it. She'd found it by accident in a second-hand shop on a work visit to London a couple of years ago. From time to time she would look at it and realize how much she missed those hills, that landscape. Her memories of it were like precious jewels that she kept locked inside a box. Sometimes she opened the lid and they surprised her with their beauty. My place, she said out loud. The moors in the north of England were wild, and as a child, she had loved them. The moor near her home was called Randall Moor, and she had spent a lot of time there walking and discovering its secrets. Now, in her dreams, she walked the moors of her childhood. They fed her imagination and her desires. In England, she loved packing a sandwich and a drink and walking out into the countryside for an hour or two. You could do that at home. The countryside was just there. She loved America, but it was so hard to go out for a walk here, she thought. The distances were so huge. When her American friends asked her what the moors were like, she was often lost for words. They're just beautiful, wild in their own special way. She often added, "Think of Emily Bronte, Wuthering Heights." Most people had at least seen the old film. She suddenly jumped up from the bed, took her old leather walking boots out of the wardrobe, and put them in her suitcase. Perhaps she would want to go for a walk over her lovely moors. She lay down again and closed her eyes. She still had time for a rest before she had to go to JFK Airport to catch her flight to London. But though she felt tired, she couldn't sleep. Her mind turned to thoughts of Jake. She felt guilty about not wanting to talk to him. They had met 8 years before at a party in Denver. He had shone like a light in the room. He was very handsome and very charming. He had black hair and the most beautiful brown eyes. He had walked up to Alex and offered her a drink. "Before I met you," he said, giving her a martini, "I felt like a man with a fork in a world of soup." "That's definitely a line from a film," she said and laughed. They had talked all evening and most of the night. She felt comfortable with him, comfortable but excited, and he was very good looking, a bit like Andy Garcia. They had started seeing a lot of each other immediately, and she soon realized that their interest in films wasn't the only thing they had in common. She fell in love quickly and totally, and they got married within 6 months. Then they moved to New York. It was better for both their careers, and they liked the energy of the place. When they got married, she felt complete. Jake was everything she'd always wanted, and, incredibly, he wasn't scared of her success because he was successful too. Now she had her career, an apartment in Manhattan, great friends, and Jake. Before she met him, she had felt that she would always be searching, traveling, that somehow she would never find her own home, that she would never find her place. But now she felt settled. Settled, she thought to herself. So where had it gone wrong? A few hours later, Alex was sitting in a quiet corner of the departure lounge at JFK Airport, waiting for her flight to London Heathrow. She felt a little better now that she was on her way, now that she was on her own. It was always easier when she was traveling, when she was going somewhere else. The flight had been delayed for over an hour. She took out a thriller and tried to read, but she couldn't concentrate. So she just sat and watched the people walking by and sitting in the departure lounge. She always liked to look at the way people dressed. She often found herself criticizing their style, their clothes. It was because of her job, she guessed. She just couldn't stand badly dressed people. Didn't they know that the way you looked said so much about you? One of the things that had attracted her to Jake in the first place was that he dressed well, Alex thought. She started reading again but found herself still unable to concentrate. Yes, Jake dressed well, but not as well as Stefano. Ah, yes, Stefano. It had started 2 years ago when she met Stefano. 2 years ago. She remembered that she had been sitting in the departure lounge at Milan Malpensa Airport. She'd been to a big fashion show and was flying to Paris to do some buying before going home to New York. They called her flight, and as usual, she waited until everyone else had boarded. She just carried on sitting there. She hated queuing up. What was the point? You had your seat already. You might as well wait until everyone else had got on. "Mi pare che viaggia molto," said a man's voice behind her. She turned round and looked right into the eyes of the most beautiful man. I'm sorry," she said. "My Italian isn't very good." She looked at him. He had to be Italian. He was dressed in that way only Italian men know how, in an Armani suit and a pale peach-coloured shirt that set off his dark skin perfectly. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said in perfect English. "I was just saying that you are an experienced traveller. Me too, I always wait until the end of the queue." He smiled and held out his hand. Stefano Cabianca. "And you are?" "Alex Kramer," she said, shaking his hand. They started chatting. He was also in the fashion business and also flying to Paris to do some buying. When they finally got on the plane, he changed his seat to sit next to her. They talked about everything, but mostly fashion and their favourite designers. Of course he loved the Italian designers, and she was a great fan of the British ones. "But the British designers," he said jokingly, "they are so strange, so weird. I mean, look at Vivienne Westwood." She laughed. "Yes," she said, "but look at Stella McCartney and John Galliano. Nobody could deny they're great designers." They had a lively conversation about Alexander McQueen. They agreed that Gucci had become too commercial. And yes, Versace was not what it had been before Gianni Versace's death. They drank a glass of wine together. It all seemed harmless, but she was aware that she was very attracted to him. Then, about 15 minutes before they landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, he said to her, "I am staying at a hotel in Paris tonight, near Notre Dame. You don't have to fly to New York until tomorrow. We are getting on so well. It would be such a pity to say goodbye now. Why don't you stay with me?" She looked at him. He was asking her to stay with him at a hotel. He was asking her to be unfaithful to her husband. It wasn't totally unexpected, but she felt her face getting hot. I'm not sure." There was a moment of hesitation, but it was only a moment. It was true that her flight to New York wasn't until the next evening. She had to be in Paris that night. "Okay," she said, smiling. "Why not?" And then came into her mind the terrible thought, no one will ever know. Since that night she had seen Stefano 6 times. They would meet up when they were travelling and their schedules coincided. In Paris, Rome, Milan. She still loved her husband, but she couldn't tell him about her affair. She also didn't know how to stop her betrayal. Now, sitting in the departure lounge at JFK, she had a feeling that was both comforting and disturbing. She was beginning to believe that only her journey home would help her to bring her betrayal to an end. At last, Alex was able to board the plane for the flight to London Heathrow. She sat down in her business class window seat, and within moments they were in the air, the features of the earth disappearing fast. Alex ordered a gin and tonic from the air steward and tried to relax. She was going home, she thought, back to the past. The plane was a Boeing 747, like the one that had brought her father back from Africa so many years ago. He had to work there for 12 months. Alex was 10 years old. "What's it like in Africa, Daddy?" she asked him on the way home. Alex had gone with her mother to Manchester Airport in a taxi to pick him up. It was a great treat. They wore their best clothes. Her mother wore a smart blue suit. Alex was wearing her favourite shiny black shoes. "Well, it's difficult to say, but very hot," her father said, smiling. She sat next to him in the taxi. He smelled of aftershave and far-off lands. She smiled now, thinking about her father. She was very like him, and she became more like him as she got older. They both loved traveling so much. For most of her childhood, her father had been abroad and she had missed him. Sometimes she would sit in her little bedroom and stare at the world globe he had given her one Christmas. She would spin it around, find the country where he was, and try to imagine what it was like. Then she would shut her eyes tight and try to picture his face, his blonde curls, and his smile. Sometimes it was hard to remember what he looked like, so she would take out the family photographs and stare at him, trying to make herself remember his face forever. She loved having a father who worked abroad, though. The girls at school had fathers who had jobs in the factories and offices in the little industrial town where they lived. Their fathers were everyday fathers, while hers was a magical one. She was different, special because of him. She had never lost that feeling that he made her special. Yes, she had really loved it. Until that hot summer's day 2 years later when she was 12 years old. At Heathrow Airport, Alex went to the car hire desk and picked up the keys to a silver-coloured Ford. She was always a bit nervous of driving on the left. When she came to England for work, it was usually just to London, so she used taxis or the underground. She never drove. However, she managed to find the M25, the motorway which goes around the edge of London, and followed it until she turned onto the road heading north. Once she was on the motorway, she began to relax. The road ahead was blue-grey, the colour of the North Sea on a cold day. It was late afternoon and the autumn light was soft. The fields on either side of the road stretched as far as you could see, dull and wet. She hadn't got to the hills yet. The world was still flat. She was lost in thought, thinking back 20 years, back to when she was 12 years old. She was running home from school. They'd been given the afternoon off for some reason. It was a warm June day, almost hot, and the sky was powder blue with little lines of white silk across it. She was thinking that she'd go home and change out of her tight, heavy school uniform and then take her fishing net down to the lake. She was free. She was running, all excited, through the fields. If she went that way, she could see her house from a long way off. As she got nearer, Alex saw her mother through an upstairs window, her bedroom window. Alex looked hard. She could also see the shape of someone else through the window. It was a man's shape, tall and broad, not her father because he was abroad, working. She went a little closer to the house and saw a red car parked outside. Then, in a flash, she understood. She saw it all. She was only 12, but she understood. She stopped dead. The world became still. The house, the car, the little garden path that led from the gate up to the front door, everything seemed to hang motionless in the lazy summer air. Tears started to hurt her eyes and she turned around and ran off into the moors. Sometimes it seems like she has never stopped running. That's when she really got to love the moors, after seeing her mother with that man. Before that, they'd just been there like the factory chimneys, but then they became her friends, a place where she could go to escape. Randall Moor especially became her place. A kind of escape from the storm, an escape from her secret. She still didn't know how she managed not to say anything to anyone, especially to her mother. A 12-year-old child finds it hard to keep something like that inside. But she did, and a terrible hatred grew inside her against her mother, and a dreadful fear that her mother would leave her father. Then, Alex thought, I'll have to go and live with Mum and that man. But nothing happened, and she just kept everything she knew inside, hard and unforgiving. And she hated her mother for betraying her father, hated her for making her feel like that. She hated her so much that she had never told anyone about it, not even Jake. Alex left home to go to college as soon as she could when she was 18, and she'd never gone back. After college, she'd gone to the United States for a visit, and she'd stayed there. Since then, she'd seen her mother and father just a few times, in the States, in London, and when she got married to Jake in Denver. But she'd always managed to avoid going home. But now, since Stefano, she understood. She understood that betrayal could happen, that disloyalty was not that difficult. Finally, she understood her mother. It was time to go home. And then I just ran off to the moors. Alex was calm when she actually talked to her mother about it. She supposed it was because she'd gone over the scene so many times in her mind. They were sitting at her mother's kitchen table, where everything important had always been discussed. Alex's father had gone out for a walk with the dog. Alex had told her mother what she'd seen that day 20 years ago. I often wondered if you knew, said her mother, her hands held tightly together in front of her. You became so distant. Though Alex was calm, her mother was upset. As usual, her first reaction had been to put the kettle on and make tea. So they sat there at the table drinking milky tea and talking about unfaithfulness. I suppose I was lonely. Your father was away so much, her mother went on. Oh, I know it was wrong. But these things happen, you know. I know, Alex said, managing a smile. She took a deep breath and told her mother about Jake and Stefano. She was surprised to find that it came out so quickly and easily. Well, Alex's mother said, you know what's best. Jake is such a lovely man. Alex remembered that at the wedding her mother had got on extremely well with Jake. And so is Dad, Alex said. Yes, said her mother, smiling. You know, I think one thing you realize as you get older is that it's really hard to find something that good and really easy to lose it. But you didn't lose Dad. No, said her mother firmly, and you won't lose Jake, not if you really want to keep him. Alex looked at her mother. Does Dad know? She asked. I mean, did you? Her mother nodded. Yes, she said. I told him. I wanted to be honest. And I wanted to know that the love we had for each other was enough to get us through. Alex stayed for a week. She and her mother talked a lot, laughed a lot, and cried a little. Alex was happy, though she knew that at the end of the week she would have a difficult decision to make. Soon she would see Jake, and she had to think about him, about the future. The day before she had to go back to New York, Alex decided to take a walk over Randall Moor, the place she'd loved so much as a child. She had to decide. Would she tell Jake about what she had done and risk losing him? She drove to the lake that lay at the foot of the moor. Leaving the little car in the car park, she put on her walking boots and set off up the steep path that led from the shore to the top of the moor. It was such a luxury, she thought, just being able to walk in the countryside. But it was hard going. The small stones that covered the path were loose and slippery. In places on the path there was thick mud from the rain a few nights ago, and she had to go back and find another way up to the top. There were only a few other walkers out that early November day, and they were far away from her on the other side of the moor. The air was cold and there were patches of snow on the hills. As she made her way slowly up the hillside, the world became a gentler, quieter place, until the only sound she could hear was of her own heavy breathing. She walked on, enveloped by more now, the lake and the rest of the valley hidden from view. The moor held her safe in its arms, and she felt again her old love of this beautiful landscape. My place, she thought. The hills could be bare and wild, but they offered a kind of comfort to her because she knew them so well. She had been away for so long, but still they were part of her. She knew their secret places. Finally, the moor began to open out, unfolding its arms and setting her free. Now she had a view of part of the lake, grey-green and silent in the valley, clear like a mirror. She stopped and looked down, enjoying the silence that lay across the valley and the sound of blood beating in her ears. She took a water bottle out of her pack, knelt down on the ground, and took a long drink. The cool water tasted of earth. Suddenly she had a flash of memory, like a faded photograph. She was a child again, of no more than 10 or 11 before she lost her innocence. It was a long, hot summer's day, and she was walking over the moors. She had brought a bottle of water from home and took a drink from time to time. She remembered the feeling of being completely alone up here. It was a delicious feeling, and one that she still enjoyed so much. It was part of her. Alex shook her head, chasing the memory away. After a few moments' rest, she started off again up the moors. The landscape began to open out like a magic carpet, slowly revealing the little houses and farms on the other side of the lake. The sheep and cows on the farms looked like those toy animals that children play with, she thought. Then slowly the village in the valley came into view, a soft brown collection of stone buildings. Then came the factory chimneys of the big town in the distance, the chimneys that had been the background to her childhood. Next the lake revealed its true extent, uncurling itself like a giant snake. Finally the full beauty of the landscape lay there beneath her. She stood at the top of the moor, feeling the silence and the moment. The view was like a picture from a child's storybook, unreal and shining. Early winter sunlight fell on the far shore of the lake, making the green of the hills glow. The air sang pure and clear. She thought of her mother and father down below in their tiny house in the tiny town. She smiled. Distance makes everything clearer. You can only see the whole when you're far enough away. Life is like this, she thought, this moving away, this distancing. There was a time when these people, this town, this landscape were your whole world, your universe, everything you knew, and this world had pressed around you and made its mark, deep and permanent, a mark that went with you everywhere. And, in some way, in some small place inside, in the deepest part of yourself, this first world would always be your destination. A world that you would always long for, but that would always be hard to find again. She thought about Jake. Yes, distance made everything clear. She knew now that she could go back to New York and talk to him, that she had to talk to him. She knew that she could tell him what had happened, what she had done, and ask his forgiveness. Ask him in the same way that her mother had asked her father for forgiveness. Tell him that she still loved him, that she would always love him. She knew that she could finally stop running away. Yes, she thought, smiling, she really was going home. And as she stood there, an awareness came to her that as she had travelled ever further outwards, she had always been looking for the way back to this, her first world, her place, and that now at last she had found the path that led to the house far below in the valley. She had finally found the way home. Water in the desert. The desert was dark pink. The sky was baby blue. The whole thing looked good enough to eat. The road from Santa Fe made its way like a black snake through the red and pink landscape. Through the hot air, the tall man standing at the side of the road could see the sharp mountain peaks of the Rockies in the distance. At last a truck came. The first thing he heard was the distant sound of an engine. Sweetest sound in the whole world when you've been out in the desert sun for 2 hours and you're beginning to think you might die there. Real sweet. He blinked at the road and looked ahead, listening. Yeah, it was a truck all right. He ran up through the bushes at the side of the road and stood right there staring into the distance so that he could see the truck as soon it came into view. Then he saw it, a bright piece of silver with sunlight bouncing off it in all directions. A great silver insect crawling across the stillness of the desert floor of New Mexico. As the truck got nearer, he tried to make out the driver. Looked like a woman with dark red hair and sunglasses, those kind of shades that the sun bounces off too. Well, that was that, he thought. No way was a woman alone going to stop for a guy hitchhiking in the middle of nowhere. He turned away. The truck just rolled on, just like he knew it would. But then he heard the sound of brakes as the truck came to a stop about 200 meters further on. He turned around again and looked at the clouds of dust the truck had thrown up. After a minute or so, the dust settled. The door of the driver's cab swung open and a pair of blue jeans came down from the cab. The woman appeared wearing a white cowgirl shirt and western boots to go with the jeans. She still had her sunglasses on. The man wondered whether her eyes were green. He always did like green eyes. He walked slowly towards the truck. "Can I help you, Mom?" he asked, trying to see her eyes behind the shades. She looked at him long and hard like she was trying to work out if he was dangerous. The man did his best to look harmless. "Yeah, well, looks like my brakes froze up," she said. "A rock must have cut the brake pipe." She paused and must have decided that he seemed okay because she said, "You any good with tape?" "You got any?" he asked. "There's some in the back of the cab," she said. "I'll get it." She got back into the cab and came back a few minutes later with the tape. He took it and crawled under the truck. "How's it going?" she shouted after a few minutes. "Hot as hell," he shouted back. About 10 minutes later, he found the place where the airline had been cut. "Here it is," he shouted. "A big fat hole the size of Texas." He set to work taping it and crawled back out sometime later, hot and dirty. The woman was still standing there in the full heat of the sun. "That should do it," the man said to her. "How far are you going to go?" "Denver," she said, moving towards the cab. "Denver? Me too. But I guess." She looked at him again, up and down. "Get in," she said slowly. You look pretty harmless to me, and I guess I owe you something." "Hey," he said, "thanks." "Yeah," she said. They both got into the driver's cab. Even with the air conditioning off, it was cool, at least a hell of a lot cooler than outside. "Have some water," she said. "What you doing out here anyway? You crazy?" She passed him a water bottle and he drank. The water was sweet and cool. He drank thirstily, letting it run down the sides of his mouth and onto his neck. He didn't answer her. "So?" she asked again. "Well, it's a long story," he said. She pushed up her glasses to take a proper look and flashed a smile at him. She had the whitest teeth he'd ever seen, and she did have the prettiest green eyes. "Yeah, we'll save it for later. It's going to be a long trip," she said, still smiling. And with that, she put her glasses down and started the engine up again. The truck continued its journey through the high, flat desert that makes up most of Interstate 25, the main highway from New Mexico to Colorado. As she drove, the man looked at her hands on the wheel. Small, strong hands. He couldn't stop looking at the New Mexican turquoise ring she was wearing. The color was so beautiful. Kind of held your attention. After a while, the ring and the endlessness of the desert made him feel lightheaded. Perhaps he'd been out in the sun for too long. "You got anything to eat in here?" he asked her. "All that work made me kinda hungry." "Sure." She smiled at him, a flash of green eyes. "Have a look in the cooler." He opened it, found a piece of bread and some cheese and ate hungrily. They rode along in silence for a while. He stared out of the window at the desert. "You got a name?" she asked suddenly. "Sure, my name's Ted," he said. "How about you?" "Lee," she said. "That's a pretty name," he said. "Pleased to meet you." There was another half hour of silence as the truck made its way across the desert floor. "I can't help but notice that you ain't got any luggage, Ted," she said suddenly. "That's right," he said. "I left it in Denver with some friends. I'm going to pick it up when I get there." "Have you been driving trucks long?" he asked. "Yeah, well, a couple of years," she said. "Like it? It's a living." She smiled that smile again and added, "I love the scenery." She nodded towards the window. As the man followed her glance out into the bright sunlight, he saw a sign coming towards them at the side of the road. "Do not pick up hitchhikers," said the sign. He glanced at her. If she had seen it, she wasn't going to say anything. That was just fine by him, he thought. "Yeah, it is pretty," he said. He closed his eyes. Very soon he fell asleep. He woke up to the truck coming to a stop outside a gas station. The noise of the brakes and the sudden movement made him jump. "Hey," said Lee, laughing. "Coming back to life, eh?" He rubbed his eyes and looked around. The sun had lost some of its fierceness. He guessed it was around 5. There were 2 other trucks parked at the gas station, and in the diner next to it, he could see the drivers drinking coffee and eating hamburgers. "I'm just going to freshen up," she said. She picked up her wash bag, went off to the driver's restroom, and came back a few minutes later. She'd combed her hair and looked really nice. "You gonna get something to drink, Ted?" she asked. "Ah, no," he said. "I'm fine, I'll wait for you." "I'll just pick up a cola and a burger," she said. "Sure you don't want anything?" "Well, that sounds good," he said, changing his mind. She came back a few minutes later with the drinks and burgers. Then she parked the truck round the back of the diner and they settled down to eat. The desert air was still hot and the ice-cold cola tasted great. "So what did you do before you started driving trucks?" he asked her between mouthfuls of burger. "Oh, this and that," she said. "I worked as a ski instructor up in Aspen for a couple of years." "Hey," he said, "that must have been a great job. Did you meet lots of famous people?" She laughed. "Well, yeah," she said, "lots, and it was a great job." "So why did you stop?" he asked. "I had an accident," she said, shaking her head. "One day I was skiing downhill really fast. The snow was great, the sun was wonderful, everything was just fine. Then bang, I fell and the next thing I knew I was in hospital." "It sounds bad," he said. "Well, could have been worse," she continued. "I ended up with just a broken leg and some bruised ribs, but it took a few months to recover. When I was well, I decided that it was time for a change, time to do something new. You know what I mean." "Well, yeah, sometimes you just have to make changes," he said, hardly knowing what he meant. There was something about this woman that made you want to talk to her, tell her about the secret places in your mind. "Wow, look at that," she said suddenly, pointing towards the mountains in the distance. The huge sky had turned orange with the light from the dying sun. It looked like someone had lit a huge fire behind the mountains. Nature was giving them the full display, and it was beautiful. "That's what I mean," she said. "The scenery's just to die for, worth more than all the money in the world." They finished their colas and left, heading out towards the state border between New Mexico and Colorado. "Truth is," she started almost as soon as they started off again, "I was trying to get away from a guy. I mean, that's why I got out of Aspen." "Oh, really?" "Yeah," she said, laughing nervously. "Well, he was my husband, in fact. I'd been trying for years to get away from him, but I couldn't. Then I had this accident, and I thought it was a good chance to disappear." There was a pause. "You don't mind me telling you all this, do you, Ted?" "No, I don't," he replied kindly. "No way. But tell me how you get mixed up with him in the first place, if you don't mind me asking." She looked at him and sighed. "Well, I met him when I was 18. He was 21. That was back in my hometown, Pueblo, Colorado. God, what a place that is. Ever been there?" He shook his head. "Lucky you," she said. "Home of the living dead, I swear. It's the kind of place you have to escape from. Anyway, he was the best-looking guy in Pueblo, though that's not saying much." She laughed. "No, he was really cute, really nice. We got married when I was 19. "That sure is young," he said. "I guess I didn't know any better," she carried on. "And anything was better than living at home, let me tell you. Anyway, it was the same old story. Before we got married, he was the sweetest guy in the world. Brought me flowers, presents, treated me nice, you know. I'd never met a man who could be that nice. But then things changed." "Changed?" "Yeah. Well, he changed practically overnight," she said. "Soon after we got married, he started drinking a lot, going out with his friends. He never took me out anymore." "And?" "Well, I would do something small, something kinda insignificant like making too much noise, but it would be enough to make him get violent," she said. "You know, it was like an excuse." "He hit you?" he asked. "He did, and I got the scars to prove it," she replied. "When he drank, he just couldn't control himself. And he drank a lot. A real whiskey drinker. Then he started gambling and going with other women." "And that was as soon as you got married?" he asked. Yeah, and it got worse, she answered. My friends told me he had other women, but I knew that. It was obvious. There were nights when he just didn't come home. When he finally turned up in the morning, you could smell the whiskey and the women on him. So, why did he want to stay with me? She asked the question for him. He just couldn't live without me. Oh, he had his women, but he always came back. He needed someone to push around to make him feel like a man. She shook her head. I used to pray that he'd drop dead or find someone else and stay away from me. I swear I had 7 years of hell. 7 years? He said, shocked. You put up with that for 7 years? Oh, it's not like I didn't try to get out, she said. Almost every single day, believe me. But it was like being in jail. No matter how sweet the grass smells outside your cell, you just can't get free. Yeah, he said. I tried everything, she continued. Left in the middle of the night, changed states, changed my name. Somehow he always found me. That's why I decided to leave Aspen after the accident. I knew that it was only a matter of time before he found me again. She shivered, remembering the fear. Lee stopped talking for a moment as she struggled with her feelings. They both listened to the silence of the desert, only broken by the comforting noise of the engine. Then she spoke again, this time in a softer voice. I'd loved him, in the beginning, she said. Yeah, loved him. But then it all changed for me. I started to hate him. Then she added seriously, matter of fact, that's the worst thing about it all. You learn about hate. You discover that you can hate somebody that much. You lose your innocence, He nodded. He knew what she meant. I was a kid when I met him, she continued. I was so full of dreams. I thought the world was full of love, that I was full of love. He taught me a lesson, all right, taught me how to hate, just like everyone else. She took a deep breath. It takes time to get over that, she said. It takes time to find love again, even to find it in your own heart. She sighed and went quiet. Her face looked kind of sad. So what happened? He asked after a few minutes. Where is he now? Ha! She said loudly. He finally got it. Finally got what he deserved. Got killed in a bar one night in Taos. In Taos? Yeah, got into a fight with some guy, she answered. Over a woman, of course. Anyway, the guy shot him, cool as you like. The police called in the middle of the night to tell me the bad news. I swear, Ted, I could hardly keep the smile off my face. First thought that came into my head was, I'm free. I've been in jail and now I'm free. I just went away and tried to forget. She smiled now, remembering it all. Don't know why I'm telling you all this, she added. There was silence for a while, apart from the soft murmur of the engine. They were about an hour from the border with Colorado. It was evening now, the softening light wrapped around them like a blanket. After about 20 minutes, she said, let's get over Rayton Pass and into Colorado, then we can catch some sleep. Great idea, he said. They were still another 7 hours or so from Denver. Mind if I turn on the radio? She asked. No, he said. How about a music channel? Sure, she said and turned it on. It was Anita Baker singing Giving You the Best That I've Got. The man closed his eyes and listened to her sweet voice. It was like honey pouring into the truck. Lee started singing along to the radio. Pretty voice, he said. Lee didn't say anything, but carried on singing. The song ended. Then a man's voice came over the radio. And now it's 8:30, and on Radio New Mexico we have some news for you, so let's go over to the newsroom and Chucho Martinez. The man cleared his throat. Why don't we change channel and get some more music? He said. Shh, said Lee. In a minute. Let me hear the news. He kept his eyes closed. Good evening, and the news tonight is that a man has escaped from the New Mexico State Prison just outside Santa Fe. The man is Jed King, doing life for killing 28-year-old Tony Garcia in a bar fight in Taos, New Mexico, 4 years ago. Drivers are being warned by the state police tonight not to pick up hitchhikers. And that's particularly if you're driving on I-25. And now on to other news. He still kept his eyes firmly closed. Well, said Lee suddenly, turning off the radio, we're almost there. There's Raton Pass just ahead of us. The man opened his eyes a little and looked up towards the pass. It was the time just before darkness falls. In another 15 or 20 minutes, the light would be completely gone. Right now, the sky was an incredible red and purple, the day's last light show. The truck started to climb towards the top of the pass. He closed his eyes again. They drove along in silence as they reached the top and started down the other side of the pass. He kept his eyes shut like he was asleep, but his mind was racing. He thought back to that night in Taos, the night he killed Tony Garcia. You're him, aren't you? The man jumped. You're Jed King. The man who killed Tony. The man who killed my husband, she said. Her voice was low. You've escaped from jail. He opened his eyes a little and nodded. I never went to the trial, she said. Tell you the truth, I never thought about who killed him. I was just happy he was gone. He looked across at her. She looked calm, kind of peaceful somehow. They had reached the other side of the pass and had already crossed the state border some time back. Lee turned the wheel and pulled the truck off the road. They were surrounded by darkness, parked in a rest area, well away from the lights of the highway. She turned to look at him and he could just make out her face, her bright green eyes shining, like cat's eyes on a dark road. That's right, he said. I killed him, but I swear it was self-defense. I didn't mean to. As he said it, unbelievably, he started to cry. He hadn't cried for a long time, maybe since he was a kid. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. He was actually weeping, great sobs coming from his chest. It was like some kind of wall breaking. Suddenly, Jed King felt the full force of the injustice of it all, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to have before. He remembered the trial, with the jury who didn't believe his story, and the witnesses, Garcia's friends, who had lied in court. He remembered the moment when the judge had said the words, "You will go to jail for life." He cried for the 4 years he had been locked up in the hell of the state penitentiary because he had killed a man who otherwise would have killed him. He cried at the feeling that he would never again be really free, never be able to listen to the silence of the desert or see the sun set over the mountains without being afraid. It wasn't my fault, believe me. You have to believe me, he said. I never wanted to. She leaned over towards him and put her finger on his lips. Shh, she said, running her fingers around his mouth. I know, she said softly. It sounds like we both escaped from a life sentence. Then she kissed him. They lay on the little bed just behind the cab and looked at the night sky through the little window in the roof. It was dark blue with a pattern of stars, like something from a child's storybook. The desert moon was so big you could see its dark and light areas. It was very cold now, in that way the desert has of suddenly showing you that it knows how to do both. It takes time, she had said, to find love again, even to find it in your own heart. As they lay there in the stillness of the desert, he knew that they had both found a way back to love, a way back from despair. Somehow he knew that it would all come right. He would be able to prove that he had shot Garcia in self-defense. He had found hope. But that was all for later. Right now they lay there in the moonlight. It was hard to describe the look they had on their faces as they listened to the silence. Perhaps you would call it relief. Yeah, that was it, relief. It was the look you have when you find something precious you thought you'd lost. The look you have when someone you've been waiting for shows up at last. The look you have when, after a long search, you find cool, sweet water in the desert. Chapter 1. A Beautiful Wife. I cannot remember how, when, or where I met Ligeia. It was a long time ago and my memory is not good, but I think I met her first in a large old city near the Rhine in Germany. She told me that she came from an ancient family, but I never knew the family name of the woman who was my friend, my partner in my studies, and finally my wife. Why did I never discover her family name? Perhaps because she did not want me to find out, but I cannot remember. I remember one thing very well. Ligeia was tall and slim. Later at the end, she became very thin. How can I describe her quiet, aristocratic movements, or the strange softness of her footsteps? If she came into my office, I only knew she was there when I heard her voice, or when she put her white hand on my shoulder. She had a beautiful face, but it was not a classical kind of beauty. There was something strange about it. I have often tried to understand it. Was it her pure white skin or her thick black hair? I looked at her long, delicate nose many times. It was perfect. I looked at her sweet mouth. How soft and red it was. And when she smiled, her teeth were white. Then I looked into her eyes. They were much bigger than normal eyes. Sometimes, when she was excited, they looked like a deer's eyes. They were black, with long black eyelashes and black eyebrows. But as I looked into them, I realized that they had a strange expression. I thought about it for many hours, sometimes all night. What was the expression in those eyes? I wanted to know. Many times I thought I almost had the answer, but then it was gone. Ligeia was very determined. She was always calm and quiet, but her determination showed in her eyes. It shone like a terrible energy, and sometimes it frightened me. Ligeia was very clever. She was excellent at Latin and Greek, and she knew many other languages perfectly. She never made a mistake. She was also a student of science and mathematics. When we were first married, I often asked her for help with my studies, and we worked together. But after she died, I was alone. Without her, I was like a child in the dark. When she first became ill, she did not come to help me as often as before. She lost weight, and her skin became pale and transparent. When I saw that she was dying, I felt desperate. Ligeia resisted death with all her energy. She was determined to live. I watched in agony as she fought for life. I knew she loved me, but I only understood how much she loved me now that she was dying. She held my hands and said that she was devoted to me. I cannot talk about it now, but let me say that her love for me was part of her determination to live. On the night she died, she suddenly got out of bed and cried, "Oh God, must I die? Must I lose my fight with death? No, I can't die like this." But my dear Ligeia died. I was so sad I could not stay in the old city by the Rhine. For a few months I travelled around. Then I bought an old abbey in an isolated part of England. This dark, sad place expressed my feelings of loneliness. But I decorated it with beautifully coloured curtains, carpets, and ornaments. I said to myself, perhaps the bright colours will make me feel happier. Unfortunately, they did not. I began to drink too much. But I do not want to speak about that time of my life. I will only say that one day I married Lady Rowena Trevanion of Tremaine. My new wife had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was very different from my first wife, but how could I ever forget Ligeia? Chapter 2. A Fight with Death. I took Lady Rowena back to a room high up in the tower of the abbey where we lived for the first month of our marriage. The room was very large, with an enormous window made of glass from Venice. The ceiling was high like a church, and in the centre there was a big gold chandelier. There were sofas from the East and an Indian bed. On the walls were long tapestries, like carpets, with designs made of gold. The tapestries moved every time the wind blew. My wife was afraid of me because I was often sad and depressed. She did not love me much and stayed away from me, but I preferred this. I always thought about Ligeia, my beautiful Ligeia, dead in the tomb. Sometimes in my dreams I called to her in the night. I imagined that perhaps my love for her could bring her back to me. At the beginning of the second month, Lady Rowena became ill. She did not sleep very well and told me she could hear sounds and movements in the tower. "You have a fever," I said. "You're imagining things." She got better, but then she went back to bed with a second illness, worse than the first. The doctors could not understand it. Again, Rowena began to hear little sounds and movements in the bedroom, and they frightened her. One night at the end of September, she woke up suddenly. I was sitting on a sofa by her bed. She whispered to me that she could hear sounds and see movements, and there was a frightened expression on her thin face, but I saw and heard nothing. "It's the wind," I explained. "You can see the tapestries moving in the wind." But her face was white with fear, and she nearly fainted. I remembered that there was some wine on the table on the other side of the room. As I walked under the light of the chandelier, a strange thing happened. I felt something invisible pass me, and on the carpet I saw a shadow, almost the shadow of a shadow. I decided to say nothing to Rowena. I poured out a glass of wine and gave it to her. Then I sat on the sofa and watched her. After some moments, I heard very quiet footsteps on the carpet, coming towards the bed. A second later, as Rowena was about to drink the wine, I saw, or perhaps I dreamed that I saw, 3 or 4 large drops of a bright red liquid fall into the glass. Rowena did not see it. She drank the wine, and I said nothing because I thought it was only my imagination. After this, Rowena's health got much worse, and on the 3rd night, she died. Her servants prepared her for the tomb, then covered her with a sheet. The next night I sat alone with her body in the bedroom. Strange forms and shadows moved around me. I looked nervously into the dark corners, at the moving tapestries, and I felt frightened. Then I looked at the carpet under the chandelier. There was no shadow there, and I felt better. When I looked at Rowena on the bed, sad memories of Ligeia, the only woman I ever loved, came back to me. It was perhaps around midnight when I heard a sound. It was quiet but clear, and it woke me from my dreams. I thought it came from the bed. I listened in terror, but I did not hear it again. I looked carefully at Rowena for any sign of life. She was not moving, but I continued to look at her. Minutes passed. Then I noticed a little colour in Rowena's face. My heart stopped in horror. I could not move. When I understood that Rowena was not dead, I tried to revive her. But soon the colour disappeared from her cheeks. Her face looked like marble again, and her lips were thin with the horrible expression of death. When her body was cold and rigid, I fell onto the sofa and dreamed about Ligeia. An hour later, I heard the same sound as before. I listened. Yes, there it was again. A sigh from the bed. I ran over and saw clearly that her lips were trembling. Then they opened, showing her bright teeth. I thought I was going mad. There was a pink colour on her cheeks and neck. Her body was getting warm again, and her heart was beating a little. Lady Rowena was alive. I did everything I could to revive her. Then suddenly her colour disappeared. Her heart stopped and her body became cold and rigid. I sat down and began to think about Ligeia again. Then again, for the 3rd time, there was a sound from the bed. But why must I describe the horrors of that night? Again I tried to revive Rowena, and then a 4th time. Each time she seemed to fight with an invisible force, and each time her body changed. I cannot say how, but she looked different. It was nearly dawn-eye when she moved again. I was sitting on the sofa, exhausted, but Rowena's body moved with more energy than before. Her colour returned, signs of life changed her face. Her eyes were closed, but she looked alive. Then she suddenly got out of bed and walked slowly to the centre of the room, like she was walking in her sleep. I did not tremble. I did not move. I was as cold and still as stone, paralysed by what I saw. As I looked at her, my head filled with wild thoughts. Was Rowena really alive? Could I really see her blonde hair and blue eyes? Why wasn't I certain? I could not see her mouth very well, but her cheeks were like pink roses. Weren't they Rowena's cheeks? But wasn't she taller than before? I was filled with a kind of madness. I ran to her, but she moved away. Then I saw her long hair moving in the wind. It was blacker than the black of midnight. And now slowly her eyes opened. I shouted like a madman, "These are the black eyes of my lost love, the eyes of Ligeia." The Caliph. Prince Michael of Valleluna sat in the park on the seat he liked best. In the coolness of the night, he felt full of life. The other seats were not filled. Cool weather sends most people home. The moon was rising over the houses on the east side of the park. Children laughed and played. Music came softly from one of the nearer streets. Around the little park, cabs rolled by. The trains that travelled high above the street rushed past. These cabs and trains with their wild noises seemed like animals outside the park. But they could not enter. The park was safe and quiet, and above the trees was the great, round, shining face of a lighted clock in a tall old building. Prince Michael's shoes were old and broken. No shoemaker could ever make them like new again. His clothes were very torn. The hair of his face had been growing for 2 weeks. It was all colours, grey and brown and red and green-yellow. His hat was older and more torn than his shoes and his other clothes. Prince Michael sat on the seat he liked best, and he smiled. It was a happy thought to him that he had enough money to buy every house he could see near the park, if he wished. He had as much gold as any rich man in this proud city of New York. He had as many jewels and houses and land. He could have sat at table with kings and queens. All the best things in the world could be his. Art, pleasure, beautiful women, honour. All the sweeter things in life were waiting for Prince Michael of Valleluna whenever he might choose to take them. But instead he was choosing to sit in torn clothes on a seat in a park. For he had tasted of the fruit, the tree of life. He had not liked the taste. Here, in this park, he felt near to the beating heart of the world. He hoped it would help him to forget that taste. These thoughts moved like a dream through the mind of Prince Michael. There was a smile across his face with its many-coloured hair. Sitting like this, in torn clothes, he loved to study other men. He loved to do good things for others. Giving was more pleasant to him than owning all his riches. It was his chief pleasure to help people who were in trouble. He liked to give to people who needed help. He liked to surprise them with princely gifts. But he always gave wisely, after careful thought. And now, as he looked at the shining face of the great clock, his smile changed. The prince always thought big thoughts. When he thought of time, he always felt a touch of sadness. Time controlled the world. People had to do what time commanded. Their comings and goings were always controlled by a clock. They were always in a hurry and always afraid because of time. It made him sad. After a little while, a young man in evening clothes came and sat upon a seat near the prince. For half an hour, he sat there nervously. Then he began to watch the face of the lighted clock above the trees. The prince could see that the young man had a trouble. He could also see that somehow the clock was part of the trouble. The prince rose and went to the young man's seat. "I am a stranger, and I shouldn't speak to you," he said, "but I can see that you are troubled. I am Prince Michael of Valleluna. I do not want people to know who I am. That is why I wear these torn clothes. It is a small pleasure of mine to help those who need help. First, I must feel sure they are worth helping. I think you are. And perhaps your trouble may be ended if you and I together decide what to do about it. The young man looked up brightly at the prince. Brightly, but he was still troubled. He laughed, then, but still the look of trouble remained. But he accepted this chance to talk to someone. "I'm glad to meet you, Prince," he said pleasantly. "Yes, I can see you don't want to be known." "That's easy to see. Thanks for your offer to help. But I don't see what you can do. It's my own problem." But thanks, Prince Michael sat down at the young man's side. People often said no to him, but they always said it pleasantly. "Clocks," said the prince, "are tied to the feet of all men and women. I have seen you watching that clock. That face commands us to act, whether or not we wish to act. Let me tell you, not to trust the numbers on that face. They will destroy you if they can. Stop looking at that clock. What does it know about living men and women?" "I usually don't look at that clock," said the young man. "I carry a watch, except when I wear evening clothes. I know men and women as I know the trees and the flowers," said the prince warmly and proudly. "I have studied many years, and I am very rich. There are few troubles that I cannot help. I have read what is in your face. I have found honor and goodness there, and trouble. Please accept my help. I can see that you are wise. Show how wise you are. Do not judge me by my torn clothes. I am sure I can help you." The young man looked at the clock again, and his face grew darker. Then he looked at a house beside the park. Lights could be seen in many rooms. 10 minutes before 9, said the young man. He raised his hands and then let them fall, as if hope had gone. He stood up and took a quick step or two away. "Remain," commanded Prince Michael. His voice was so powerful that the young man turned quickly. He laughed a little. "I'll wait 10 minutes and then I'll go," he said in a low voice, as if only to himself. Then to the prince he said, "I'll join you. We'll destroy all the clocks, and women too." "Sit down," said the prince softly. "I do not accept that. I do not include women. Women are enemies of clocks. They are born that way. Therefore, they are friends of those who wish to destroy clocks. If you can trust me, tell me your story." The young man sat down again and laughed loudly. "Prince, I will," he said. He did not believe that Prince Michael was really a prince. His manner of speaking proved that. "Do you see that house, Prince? That house with lights in 3 windows on the 3rd floor? At 6 tonight I was in that house with the young lady I was going to marry. I'd been doing wrong, my dear Prince, and she heard about it. I was sorry. I wanted her to forget it. We are always asking women to forget things like that, aren't we, Prince? I want time to think," she said. "I will either forget it forever or never see your face again. At 8:30, she said, "watch the middle window on the 3rd floor of this house. If I decide to forget, I will hang out a long white cloth. You will know then that everything is as it was before. And you may come to me. If you see nothing hanging from the window, you will know that everything between us is finished forever." "That," said the young man, "is why I have been watching that clock. The time was past 23 minutes ago. Do you see why I am a little troubled, my torn prince?" "Let me tell you again," said Prince Michael in his soft voice, "that women are the born enemies of clocks. Clocks are bad, women are good. The white cloth may yet appear." "Never," said the young man hopelessly. "You don't know Marion. She is always on time to the minute. That was the first thing I liked about her. At 8:31 I should have known that everything was finished. I'm going to go west. I'll get on the train tonight. I'll find some way to forget her. Good night." Prince Michael smiled his gentle, understanding smile. He caught the other's arm. The bright light in the prince's eyes was softening. It was dreamlike, clouded. "Wait," he said, "till the clock tells the hour. I have riches and power, and I am wiser than most men. But when I hear the clock tell the hour, I am afraid. Stay with me till then. This woman shall be yours. You have the promise of the Prince of Valleluna. On the day you are married, I will give you $100,000 and a great house beside the Hudson River." "But there must be no clocks in that house. Do you agree to that?" "Sure," said the young man. "I don't like clocks." He looked again at the clock above the trees. It was 3 minutes before 9. "I think," said Prince Michael, "that I will sleep a little." It has been a long day. He lay down on the seat, as if he had often done it before. "You'll find me on this park on any evening when the weather is good," said the prince. "Come to me when you know the day you'll be married. I'll give you the money." "Thanks, Prince," said the young man. "That day isn't going to come." But thanks, Prince Michael fell into a deep sleep. His hat rolled on the ground. The young man lifted it, placed it over the prince's face, and moved one of the prince's legs into an easier position. "Poor fellow," he said. He pulled the torn coat together over the prince's body. It was 9. Loud and surprising came the voice of the clock telling the hour. The young man took a deep breath and turned for one more look at the house, and he gave a shout of joy. From the middle window on the 3rd floor, a snow-white, wonderful cloth was hanging. Through the park, a man came hurrying home. "Will you tell me the time, please?" asked the young man. The other man took out his watch. 29.5 minutes after 8. And then he looked up at the clock. "But that clock is wrong," the man said. "The first time in 10 years. My watch is always—" But he was talking to no one. He turned and saw the young man running toward the house with 3 lighted windows on the 3rd floor. And in the morning 2 cops walked through the park. There was only one person to be seen. A man, asleep on a long park seat. They stopped to look at him. "It's Michael the Dreamer," said one. "He has been sleeping like this in the park for 20 years. He won't live much longer, I guess." The other cop looked at something in the sleeper's hand. "Look at this," he said. $50. I wish I could have a dream like that." And then they gave Prince Michael of Valleluna a hard shake and brought him out of his dreams and into real life.